Hi, my name is Pete Pallai, and I'm the founder of My Pilates London. Yes, you guessed it, in London, UK. I'm also a balanced body educator, and I'm here today to introduce you to the toe corrector, toe stretcher, toe strengthener, otherwise known as Joe's Gizmo. So we are going to go through a couple of simple exercises to best illustrate how we can use this to help us with our feet, our alignment, but also the fascial system, the connections that lift higher up through the body. And we'll illustrate this also through a couple of simple mat exercises. So I'm looking forward to doing this with you. Let's get on with it. Let's have a look at what's in the packet. So I'm going to start with this one, Joe's Gizmo with the red loops. This is the lighter intensity. So if you pull, you can see it's quite easy to pull this apart. You can see the coils, you can see the contraption, how that works. One loop on either side. Now I might use this pretty much for single digit work, for example. And this gives me a very light, easy, manageable resistance or assistance, as the case may be. Or we have this option with the black loops, a little bit stronger, well, definitely quite a bit stronger, which I might use for multiple digits, so perhaps 2 toes in each loop, or single big toe in each loop, but for standing work, supine footwork on the reformer, etc. So I had these options here. Also in the packet, you'll find this useful little guide as to how to conduct some of the simpler movements and more straightforward movements with Joe's Gizmo. Now thereon, you can experiment, you can play, and get a feel for how this works. What I'm going to start with today with you is I'm going to go for some of that single digit big toe work here. So I'm going to place one loop over the distal part, the end part of my big toe, and I'm going to just hold the loop with my finger up above here. The other thing I do is I gently steer the toe towards the midline because it tends to go laterally, starts to push towards the other toes. So I'm wanting to line that up a little bit for myself. And I'm going to start to lift and lower. So I've got some resistance on there, and I'm lifting and lowering the big toe, working on flexion, not moving the upper hand here, the one that's holding the other loop, and trying to keep my metatarsal grounded. Very interesting when I do this on the other foot, very different ROM in that toe and joint. So highlight something for me to work on. Now the other option I have here for extension is to cross my ankle over on top of the knee here. Again, place the loop to the distal part of the toe. And I'm going to pull here. And then I can start to work the big toe more in isolation, into some extension, doing my very best not to shift or move the other toes in unison, not dance together. And also you'll see that this arm doesn't move. I'm not following through. I'm keeping it very still so that as I pull, the tension increases. So that's one way of doing it. Actually, as I'm doing this, I realize maybe I should have had a pedicure, or maybe not. So there are your options there in a seated position if it's easier for some flexion and extension. So we find ourselves having gone from seated to a standing position. And this time I've opted for the stronger intensity, the black loops on Joe's Gizmo, lined around, so it's a single digit work here, wrapped around the big toes, feet hip width. So first of all, I keep looking down because I'm checking my alignment, and I'm also seeing that my big toes are no longer splaying out. Okay, they're drawing more towards the midline. So that's already a healthy thing to be aware of. The other thing to be aware of is where we position the loops on the toes. So that's very important as well. If I want to focus on the alignment, I might put them on the more distal end, the end of the toes. If we're dealing with bunions, then perhaps they'll be a little bit closer to the joint. So again, we must be aware of how we position the loops around the toe. First thing I do is I'm going to try some squats. So in this hip width position, just some gentle, easy squats, keeping my spine in neutral for the experience. And I advise this. I do advise that you try with not using Joe's Gizmo to a light resistance to maybe a little bit of a stronger resistance and see how that ramps up, see how the experience is for you. But for now, it feels good. I feel bound. I feel solid, working fascial lines up to the midline of the body and very accessible, but also somewhat connected, which is an important thing. The other thing I might do here now is to go into releve. So from this hip width aligned position, draw the heels together, gently lift, lower the heels, and separate. So I'm working my rotators here now. Sorry, I'm not the most graceful, but I do my bit. And when we do this kind of exercise, I'm always very conscious of making sure the heels remain connected. That adds something to the exercise and the movement, so maintaining that connection up to the midline. Now, I already feel that, as I said, I can feel a bit of the fascial lines through the inside of the legs into pelvic floor. So we have that as number one, and maybe we can take that a little bit further by binding both of the toes, so the big toe and the one next to it, into one loop, and same on the other loop. So, again, we're addressing some alignment here. So that second toe is now being drawn a little bit more forward in alignment and in sync with the big toe. I will try exactly the same exercises, but I'll think a little bit about whether I have a little bit more pull with Joe's Gizmo or a little bit less, stepping in ever so slightly. I'm going to go for a little bit more here, and I'm going to go back into my squats. And again, I'm very mindful and conscious of what that brings to the experience, how that feels. I guess I'd feel a lot more from having two toes in each loop. I feel much more connected. I feel aligned, which is very important for me. And then from there, I'll go to releve, coming up. Now that's definitely a lot more return here, a lot more powerful here. There's a bit of a oucher in a good way. So drawing the heels wide, hip width, drawing them together, lifting, separating, together, lifting, separating. That's definitely given me plenty of return on rotators. I feel a bit of TA connection, pelvic floor connection, fascial lines up through the inner thigh. Give that a try. So now we're going to try some mat work, 3 mat exercises. We're going to start with crisscross, then double leg stretch, then hundreds. I've got still the stronger tensity, the black loops with Joe's Gizmo. I'm going to bring the legs up into tabletop, and I'm doing my best. I've got a little bit of pull. As soon as I'm pulling towards hip width, everything switches on here. So that's already a great benefit. But also looking at my feet, they're nicely aligned. I've got a slight dorsiflexion. I'm trying not to curl or sickle the toes. And I'm going to come into my crisscross. So we're here. And a slight turn, as in a pull and push. Now, with Joe's Gizmo hooked onto my toes, it's going to limit my ROM, but it also intensifies that return through the obliques. And you can see there's a little shift. I turn right, my right knee pulls in a little bit. Left knee pulls in a little bit. I'm maintaining good tension on our little Gizmo friend here. I'm not dropping all the way down. It's just my choice here. I want to keep firing through the abdominals and focus very much on the upper end of this range and the obliques. So immediately, there's a great benefit. I'm feeling The obliques, as I said, the TA, midline, pelvic floor, everything is working very nicely, very sweetly. Okay, then we come into our double leg. So I'm in dorsiflexion again. I'll extend and back. Now it's very easy to lose connection through the feet. So I'm very focused here on checking my feet, my toe position, that I'm not going into too much extension or too much flexion with the big toe. So again, I'm keeping this in dorsiflexion. And to finish here, I'll nudge the legs forward. I'll start in my supine position. Curl up, reaching through my fingertips. I've got a slight pull, actually quite a strong pull on the Gizmo, and I move into my hundreds. So not just the arms working like pistons, but the pull through the midline and through the big toes is definitely amplifying that experience very, very nicely. Again, a full connection from the feet up. Oof. Thank you for watching this Balanced Body video.